Hi, it's Roxanne from Curly and Ren Radio, and I am here with Daniel Erickson, who is the lead writer on Star Wars The Old Republic, BioWare's upcoming MMO. So, hi Daniel, how are you?
Fantastic. We're out at PAX, which is easily my favorite show. Getting to see real people come in, play the game, all the fan reaction, it's amazing. It's a total re-energizing for the team.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask kind of a couple of questions about just, I guess, writing in general, and then we're going to kind of narrow down into some more mechanical stuff, I guess. One of the questions I have is, as a writer for games, how is that different than writing for maybe other medium? And as a writer, or as a storyteller, I guess, what's your favorite thing that writing for games has allowed you to do that maybe you couldn't do in, like, film?
Well, the biggest difference is you have to understand game design. Writing for games is a part of the game design world. So you can't come in and just be a writer of another medium and say, hey, and now I'm doing game stories, any more than you can be a novelist and just instantly write movies. Totally different medium, totally different idea. My favorite thing about it is that it allows us to do really ownership experiences. So when players play games, you never hear them say, and then Lara Croft did this, and then Lara Croft did that. It's always, I did this, I did that. Once you start telling real stories and you start giving them real choices, they get involved and they feel like they are in control. It doesn't become, it's not our story we're going to write, it's their story that we're going to write. And then they come in and they finish up, right? They're the missing ingredient. If you tried to tell any big video game story, which is always why it's a hard thing with like video game movies, is because they're missing the fact that without the player, the story is incomplete. So it always feels a little odd. But once that player comes in there, you get an experience that isn't like any other sort of storytelling.
I guess I want to talk about a little bit about, you worked on Dragon Age, right? And that game featured kind of the more traditional dialogue trees as a means of just, I guess, displaying speech. And now with Tor, we've moved more to the that Mass Effect conversation wheel. And do you see that, I guess, as just, you know, like an evolution of the dialogue tree that like had to happen? And like, what was the dialogue tree let you do that the other thing couldn't? Or sorry, then that the conversation wheel, like, how is that better? And what do you think about it?
Really the change, and I don't think we're ever going back across BioWare, is that once we put in player voiceover, the player became the star. The difference from Mass Effect from almost any other game I'd seen is when people talk about the Old Republic, when people talk about Baldur's Gate, they always name their favorite characters, and they're always companion characters or people you fought. Very often when people talk about who they cared about in Mass Effect, it was Shepard. People cared about themselves, because once they actually had their own class, right? Once they actually had their own voice, you could give them really exciting lines. You could make them the hero, them the people who were going to have all the great lines and all the great pieces. So when we saw that, we were very early in development, and we got our first early, looks at Mass Effect. And I went in James's office and I said, what are we going to do with this? Because we were not planning going that direction originally. And what we did is we sat down and we put together a demo, because we said, okay, they're not going to let us do player VO. We've got 8 classes across 2 genders with the biggest game in the world. No way. Way too expensive, way too crazy, just trying to cast for it. Insane. So we built a demo for each. We built a demo of the same thing with the player VO and without. And we sent them all the way up the lines to the top of the BioWare brass and the EA and the top of the Lucas and said, here's what it would cost, here's what the effort would be, here's the 2 differences. And the word totally surprised us and came down, no, absolutely, you've got to do it. So, and the dialogue wheel is a natural evolution from it. If nobody wants to listen to VO, then it's the same thing they just read. They'll just skip past it. So you can do all that money for VO and you've wasted it. So Mass Effect had a brilliant solution to it, which was the paraphrase solution. You're picking a basic idea, which one is less reading. One of the things that we've always hated about the dialogue trees is you're reading like 5 responses, but you're only choosing one of them. So you're actually experiencing more gameplay you're experiencing more story that didn't happen in your story than story that did. Does that make sense? Because you've actually read more dialogue that you're not going to choose than even the NPC has said. The paraphrase system takes care of it entirely. You read a few short things, and then you really only experience what's happening.
That leads in well to something I wanted to mention, where yeah, like, in film or theater, there's all these devices to kind of condense time in between action, like the cut or a scene change or just the way dialogue is written. And I feel like the conversation reel really tries to mimic that rhythm, where it's a lot rhythmically faster than the natural speech would happen, and you're kind of getting like like the most exciting version of a natural speech conversation that would happen. So it's just propelling you forward from like action and plot points, like through conversation, the way you would like action in a traditional film or media like that. But my question is, how is that like, so that's NPC like dialogue, and that serves its role is to like help establish the character's role and the world and to move action forward. Is it going to be totally jarring that like player to player dialogue is going to be what we're typically used to in MMOs, which is so like tangential and slow? And I mean, well, what do you think about the fact that they live on different levels?
Well, I think players very much separate their concept of player and character, and we've noticed that a lot. One of the things I was really fascinated with was the fact that people will very often, you get to see each other's characters because you go in multiplayer dialogue together, and then it does work like the NPC dialogue does. And we do use the things, we use the cuts, we use the wipes, we use all that to separate away and say, like, you'll see a lot of the times your player, especially your really smart classes like the Jedi Consular, will start to explain something to someone and be like, well, actually, it turns out that, and then we wipe and he comes back, and that's the history of the Empire, right? So we still use those. And then players will open up their chat windows while they're having those conversations and talk to each other. The same way that in a pen and paper game, the players may be talking and then they'll come back and they'll talk as themselves. So you kind of get a metagame thing. So it doesn't seem very strange, because really the amount of people who full RP and talk in character to each other in games is pretty rare anyway, and they're so dedicated to it that they'll take care of themselves.
I was at the panel that you talked at yesterday, where you were explaining a little bit about how the multiplayer dialogue system was actually something that evolved kind of prototypically for Dragon Age, and how just your initial reaction to it was different than what it is now. And I was just wondering if you could talk really quickly about that.
Sure. So, I mean, it didn't evolve as much from Dragon Age. It's just as James and I were dreaming about doing the MMO, doing the multiplayer. We didn't know if it was going to be an MMO or just like a giant Neverwinter Nights, but doing the multiplayer RPG years ago. And so I had started to put together a system back then that eventually became the multiplayer dialogue system that's in the game now. And my first thought was that we had to isolate sort of metagame from it entirely. I didn't want the chat window open. I didn't want any of that. I was convinced that players, when they were playing it, would not be able to concentrate, even putting in the roles for the dialogue choices to let you compete. I thought might be too much gameplay, and I thought it was going to distract people out and not let them concentrate on the story. Turns out just the opposite. Players are smart. They're used to super multitasking all over the place. First thing they wanted was they wanted their chat windows, they wanted to talk to their friends, they wanted to argue about the decisions they were making, they wanted to yell and scream about the fact that one guy keeps rolling well and he gets all the answers right. They wanted to call each other names and have fun, and just, yeah, it makes a totally different experience, and it's very inspiring to see.
Yeah, I totally kind of understand where you were initially coming from, because one of the things I love about the Mass Effect conversation wheel is that it it really speeds up things, and that interface, it's a lot more invisible than just the normal branching dialogue tree, because you kind of, one of the great things about it is that when you choose things, it's sort of a surprise to you, like the way they play out, because you kind of get the intention maybe, but then the shepherd will like punch someone, or it's just really exciting. And because I feel like too often in video games, the main character is kind of that empty shell, that like straight man, and everyone around you is more interesting. And it's great that people are saying that Shepard is the character they connect to the most, because making, I think, the player character as watchable as all the colorful people around him is like really, really cool.
And the more you see of the Old Republic, you'll realize we've taken that and we've really pushed with it. Like, your main character is the center. They are the hero. They are doing the cool stuff. It's very interesting for the characters too that can't really be tasked. So like by the time you get to some of the later chapters, your quests are literally coming from your character. Like, you're the one who's calling the meetings between your companion characters. You know what's going on. You're giving the people the briefing, so it's a very different feel.
On our show, Corellium Radio, we do this kind of test every week where we take like situations from real life and we try to figure out like how you would react based on the light side, dark side kind of morality scheme. And so I'm going to explain the test for you.
Sure.
And this is the test of the closing elevator door. And the scenario is, you know, you catch the elevator, you get in, and from the far end of the lobby, you see someone start to kind of like book it and run towards the elevator, and you can tell that they're probably not going to make it. So, like, how do you react? Do you, one, you know, you kind of catch their eye and you hit the open door button. Maybe you even go so far as to, like, you know, put your arm in the path of the door. Do you, two, kind of, you know, step out of the way of the door and pretend to be texting someone maybe and just totally hope that they don't make it? Or three, do you start to, you know, slam on the closed door button because you don't really feel like waiting the extra 10 seconds till they get there and you have places to be?
I'm definitely the light side kid, and I'm always the guy who's going to put his hand in the door. I think the one that's missing there is the actual Sith one, because what people get confused too much with the dark side thing. The dark side guy is not going to jam on the door close button because it's not useful for him, right? I mean, maybe if he's worried that guy's going to make him late. The real dark side guy is going to do nothing and maybe catch the guy's eye right as he starts to get there and smile as the door is shut. But I'm always going to stop it.
Well, that's awesome. And thank you so much for talking to us. Terrell 5 was fantastic, you know, playing the game for the first time.
The hat is proof that she actually beat Terrell 5, one of very, very few groups to do it, all right? So you cannot doubt the creds.
All right, awesome. Thanks again.
Thank you.